What is right? What is wrong? What is real and what is not? What is really the truth? What is a lie? What is an illusion? The spirit of multidimensionalism basically indicates that all of it can be valid. And it is perhaps the validity of multidimensionalism that we should hone more into before we make things black or white. Sanbonan, welcome to episode 5 of the Beautiful Mess podcast, brought to you by me, Ubusisiwe Gadlamin. In this episode, I want to unpack the elements of multidimensionalism and highlight some of the ways in which it helps us with solutions. The message is brought with love, as usual, and I hope it shifts whatever needs to be shifted inside of you. Language gives us hints and clues about who and what we are as beings. It is a mirror of our nature and reality. We often allocate some of the concepts that we express through language to the objects around us. But we are also very much like these objects, and what we can do with these objects, as well as how these objects function, is also what we as humans can be and how we can and do function too. We are just as flexible in nature as some of these objects. We are also influenced by physics and laws, as are these objects. A lot of what we have invented and created as humans, using physics and other laws, is an extension of what we are. Our human form is not rigid. It is actually flexible, and imagination is one of the tools of consciousness we have at our disposal to access these flexible parts of us, these parts of us that can't be seen or perhaps clearly articulated with words. Now, I want to take all of this and focus it towards multidimensionalism, a term that describes anything with many different parts or aspects. Concepts such as duality and polarity can also form part of multidimensionalism. Both polarity and duality refer to two opposite or contradictory aspects of something. For the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to specifically focus on multidimensionalism, because unlike duality and polarity, it is a concept that is all-encompassing and a closer reflection of what I want to unpack about us as beings. It has more range and speaks to the existence of several variations in a single element, some of which are similar, some of which are contradictory, or completely different altogether. There is somewhat of a romance to multidimensionalism because the existence of variations inspires creativity. It gives one room to play with different elements in order to depict a story. We've always seen multidimensionalism being used to relay stories, to relay poetry, to exhibit art overall. And in this episode, I want to talk about its practical and everyday existence in our human lives, to put us at the center of it and unpack how we can and should use it to live and survive. Something that some of us may already know by now is that how we view any particular circumstance influences the impact that it has on our being and on our lives. It is often said that there are two sides to a story, but there's actually far more than that. Our existence is not like a coin with two sides. And the reason why I want to unpack this is not only to encourage you to open yourself to expansion and divine information, but to also highlight the fact that we have access to more solutions than we may often hold space for. Our life's survival kit is in fact big, and it is in fact packed. At the very core of our nature, there is no lack, and we are not missing that which we need. Life circumstances come in an unorthodox shape, if you will. There is a bottom, top, sides, and insides. In between all of that, there are also other protruding corners and angles that make up the shape of a circumstance. All of these parts have their own purpose and messages. Without studying, exploring, and searching all around the unorthodox shape of the circumstance, you can't confidently say that you know everything about it. The angle at which the shape or circumstance lands is often not the full view of it. At that point, you are often still seeing 1% of it only. And often, we make decisions and conclusions from that 1% of insight. To understand more than that 1% of that situation or circumstance, intentional reflection, engagement, meditation, and unraveling of that circumstance's shape is necessary. Further to circumstances being an unorthodox shape, this realm of earth that our bodies of flesh occupy presents a limited view of situations as well as illusions. And that's why we need spirit. By that I mean we need access and connection to our spiritual bodies and our spiritual guides. The spiritual eye can see what the eye of flesh can't see. The spiritual ear can hear what the ear of flesh can't hear. The spiritual body can go to places that the body of flesh may not be able to reach. Spirit is resourceful in that it allows us to see far more than the 1% view that was initially presented when the situation manifested in our lives. It allows us to also see past the illusions. Now, the unorthodox shape of any given circumstance, together with Earth's limited presentation of a situation, demands us to recognize, understand, and accept multidimensionalism, a phenomena that I am now going to describe as one that holds space for a collection of other stories to exist within one tale. Also a phenomena that allows variations of what is, period. In recognizing, accepting, and understanding multidimensionalism, we make ourselves available to the divine information that may not have been apparent upon our first meeting with the situation. In fact, multidimensionalism tends to show itself in the hindsight anyway. Your first view is most likely always going to be shallow. And that's actually normal, because that's just reflex. That's just how our minds are programmed. And my message to you here is not to stop there. Don't return to yourself with information, having only seen the shallow end and stop there. Go back to swim deeper into the ocean. Find out more about the multidimensionalism of the circumstance. In understanding and holding the concept of multidimensionalism, something that is very important to consider is time. Often, it's not possible for us to hold space for all of the sides and aspects of any given situation, for all the sides and aspects of its unorthodox shape. In addition to that, the other aspects have a set time for their revelation in your life. You may only go on to receive the revelation of one aspect days later, months later, or even years later. And you may go on to hold another aspect of that same situation a few years later too. On a macro level, it can easily take you an entire lifetime to know the full story of a circumstance that manifested in the earlier years of your life, because each of its aspects require a set period of your living through them. And even when you do understand the other aspect at a later stage, no matter how much later, it doesn't erase the truth of the earlier understanding that you held. You held it that way because that was the truth of what you were feeling and of your reality at the time. And my message to you here is that it's important to not allow your wiser and evolved self to invalidate the self of you that was not as wise. Because that version of you, it had its reason. It had its place too. Why? Because you are multi-dimensional. Imagine that you are along stairway, for example. To get to the top of the stairway, you have to walk on the steps that are at the bottom. It's the only way to reach the top. As you reach the top step, your climb becomes more steady because you have become more familiar with that stairway. And this is a metaphor of life. You only know better eventually because there was a point where you didn't know better at all. You need that reference to make sense of your life, yourself, and your growth, and to keep rewriting and writing and editing your life's strategy. We know by now that nobody and nothing simply just lands inside their clarity from the very beginning. Journeying is a large part of our purpose. Journeying is a large part of our multi-dimensional nature. In the same breath, whatever poor or silly choices you once made, they were not necessarily wrong. You were moving to the information that you had at the time. And that's all we can ever do. Move to the information that we have. And something we should never forget when we know better is that the Creator gave us free will on purpose. The Creator allowed us to see whatever we felt that we wanted to see and experience, to move to the information that we had. That's part of the life contract. So it is not wrong or even bad that you made poor choices before. God knew you would, and God allowed you to. God knows what information you had then, and God was watching you with the understanding that it was part of the path that was laid out for you. Part of the path of your becoming. Now, the duality of that, which is often held, especially in this time of the collective's awakening, is that we were lost. And sure, this may hold true, but what also holds true is that we were still on the right path. The evidence of that is that you are still here. The bigger evidence of that is that you are here right now to receive this message. You are not just a moving disaster. You are following part of the truth of your path, moving to the information that you had. So receive this. You are not just a moving disaster. You are following part of the truth of your path, and moving to the information that you had. Receive this and forgive yourself. Forgive what you didn't know, and know that it was also part of your multidimensionalism. In all of this, I'd also like for your mind to flow to the structure and purpose of a book, and our similarity to a book as humans. When you are reading through a book, you are constantly holding references from the previous chapter. You don't tear out the pages when you reach a new chapter, nor do you crumple up those pages. I share this to say, even as you explore other parts of you and become something new or something more, you don't simply kill the other versions of you. That's not even healthy. The exposed front view of a circumstance's shape doesn't suddenly make its other angles and shapes disappear just because they are not the focus in that particular moment. They are still part of the book of you. And you may sometimes need to refer back to them for certain reasons. Duality allows you to hold the old and the new and make sense of how it all came together for you. Make sense of how your parts are linked instead of looking to erase them. And again, all of these revelations have their allocated times for revelation and understanding. You have to have lived through a certain period to get to the next season. When a book is opened or closed, all of its pages sit still in their place and they form part of what makes the book that thick. The pages in the book of you all form part of what makes you who you are today. And we need to get better at knowing and accepting this multidimensional nature about ourselves and others too. We need to get better at seeing all these forms of life. We don't have to like them, but we should at least try to acknowledge that they are there, because erasure is not what will serve us. It often only leads to conflict. With all that said, I go back to say, multidimensionalism makes space for a collection of stories to exist in one tale. I go back to say, life circumstances have an unorthodox shape with different sides and other protruding angles. I also go back to say, the messages and purpose of these aspects have an allocated time to reveal themselves. And I ask that you remember and hold this every time someone alludes to your being late, or when someone says that you should have been this or that by now. The universe will not allow you to comfortably stay in places that you should no longer be in. You will know when it's time for you to make a shift. It often feels like pain and unsettlement. This pain and unsettlement, this discomfort and distress is unfortunately the signal that we finally listen to make a shift. And that too is duality playing itself out. You're in pain and unsettled because it hurts to be there. But that same pain and unsettlement is affirmation and communication of your time to shift. And if you hold that 1% that I mentioned before, you remain stuck in the pain and unsettlement only. And you may go on to victimize yourself, to constantly criticize yourself, and perhaps to even hate yourself. But if you swim deeper in the ocean, you realize as well that this unsettlement is godly communication that you need, deserve something better, something different, something more. The pain is ruthless and mean, yes, but the pain is also love calling out to you. And what all of that is the multidimensional nature of your existence. Another layer of our multidimensionalism is that we also walk with spiritual guides, and they also have their own set of multidimensionalism that incorporates dualities and polarities. And all of that is often expressed through the vessel of the living person that they are connected to. And this applies to all of us. We all walk with these spirits. Their preferences, dislikes, values, and ethics, amongst other factors, can all be expressed through one human being. And this is an important thing to take into consideration when it comes to mental illness and mental unsettlement. In an ideal world, medical practitioners, as well as spiritual practitioners, should all be involved when looking into one's mental health. In an ideal world, all of their parts should be seen so that there can be a clearer separation between one's personal mental state and one's spiritual nature and inheritance. Further to that, this is also why you don't have to limit yourself to one discipline of healing. The very fact that there are a variety of wellness practitioners and methods speaks back to our multidimensional nature. I'm not going to expand on this one further. It's an entire conversation on its own, but I would like you to hold it within the context of this conversation. Now, on a more micro level, at any given moment of any given day, we are exposed to situations that are packed with various stories, reasons, meanings, and messages. This is how day-to-day life is no different from a dream. In the dream landscape, we experience various different things in one setting. And as frustrating and confusing as that may be, our dreams are probably the most accurate view of our existence. Our existence is indeed that complex, that layered, and that multifaceted. Interestingly enough, though, we know that our dreams require us to intentionally interpret their meanings and symbols, but we don't usually offer that same attention, consciousness, and patience to the circumstances that happen in our day-to-day lives. And part of what contributes to that, understandably enough, is the world's pace and conditions. We are often under pressure to come up with solutions on the spot and react as soon as possible. We hardly offer ourselves and others that patience. But we should actually demand those moments of pausing for ourselves and for others. Because again, our day-to-day lives are no different from how our dreams play out. The day-to-day circumstances require careful, wise, and intentional engagement. They also require us to walk around the unorthodox shape of a circumstance to get information and intel on what the said situation is really here to do to us and what it came to do in our lives, what it came to say. It is only after we have understood that we can then respond with wisdom and even love to the circumstance, to the next person, and most importantly, to ourselves. With these day-to-day circumstances, sometimes there is a specific action required. Sometimes the only thing required is your awareness of it and nothing more. Sometimes the situation is literally just a conversation for you to learn from and hold as information about yourself and your life and your path. And you will probably go on to reference that at a later stage. So there's lots of possible responses to these day-to-day circumstances, just as there is with dreams. But you have to sit through them. You have to engage with them. You have to reflect on them deeply, intentionally, to understand how you need to move around them. Because of multidimensionalism, there is space for solutions to be explored and for us to carefully select the narrative that we write for ourselves and live by. For that particular circumstance, and for our lives overall, it is evidence that there is always an alternative choice and story. Demand yourself to pause so that you can walk through all of this before marrying a certain kind of reality. Your relationships, your career, your social life, your spiritual life. There is multidimensionalism in all of that. Collections of narratives to choose from. A set of colors to paint yourself with and to paint the circumstance with. Explore this for yourself and explore that in others. Be that kind of adventurer so that you can hold healthy space for yourself and others. Everything that the universe throws your way has anchors for you to hold on to. And it has things for you to unravel more of yourself from and learn from. And please note that in all of this, I am not suggesting that you must be fake or pretend. What I'm saying is that there are other sub-truths beneath the main truth that is seen from the shallow end. If you really want to live, you need to swim deeper into the ocean of multidimensionalism to collect more direction. You need to realize deeply that there is far more to you and your life journey than what your mind may initially perceive. Go deep into that ocean with the support of your God, your soul connections on earth, and your spiritual guides to hold and unravel the entirety of your complexity. Experience that kind of expansion. You are a collection of stories. With all that said, what I want to leave you with is this. Engage with multidimensionalism intentionally. Engage and embrace and see your multidimensional nature. Walk around the unorthodox shapes of your circumstances and being, and see how many other solutions have been laid out for you to survive this lifetime. And in doing all of that, find it in yourself to embrace all the pages of the book that is you, and find it in yourself to also embrace the pages of this divine plan that we are a part of and moving through together as individuals. There are many stories and solutions that have been laid out for us to survive this lifetime.